Good afternoon, everyone. You're now tuned into a reasonable conversation on Nusound Radio 92 FM. Hope everyone's having a great Easter weekend. I'm Prerna and I'll be with you till 12:30. Today we'll be having a shorter show than usual owing to the holidays. I'm very fortunate to have a very special guest in the studio with me today, Paul Uppal, who is the Member of Parliament for Wolverhampton South West. Paul was elected in 2010 and is the only Sikh Member of Parliament. Prior to becoming an MP, Paul ran his own business. Hi Paul, how are you? Thank you so much for coming to Nusound Radio.
Hi, I'm very well. Thanks for inviting me along.
So you were elected as a Member of Parliament for Wolverhampton South West in 2010. Just to give our listeners a bit of background, how did you get into politics?
My own background is, I'm an East African Sikh. So although I was born in the UK, I was born in Smethwick, my family came over in the early 60s. My dad came over in 61. And the East African Asian experience was, for us as a family, similar to many Asian families at that time. We actually ran an electrical business, and although it probably didn't affect my dad so much, my Daya, my uncle, my dad's older brother, particularly did get a sort of fairly rough experience from this. And I guess as a family, when you go through an experience like that, I mean, it wasn't as probably as harsh as the Ugandan experience, but life was made very uncomfortable for a lot of Asian businesses and Asian people generally in Kenya and East Africa at that time. And I guess what it showed to us as a family, and particularly for me as a young person growing up, was how important politics is. You know, generally within the Asian community, we do very well in education, we do very well in the professions, we do very well in business, of course. But I think often in terms of our public involvement, be it either through politics or even it can be through the arts or through journalism, often our impact is quite minimal. We don't always get the traction and the resonance in those areas that we probably should do. And so from an early age, I got interested in politics around the table when we were having roti or parathe or whatever we were eating at that time, or samosa, or if my mum was making sabji, or sometimes my dad was making sabji because he taught my mum to cook. Was that politics would always be a big discussion point, so we'd talk about stuff like that. And so I got interested in politics very early on, because I guess what I'm saying is, for us as a family, it made us realise that the politics really matters. You know, this is a wonderful country, a great country we live in, and it's very easy for people to take politics for granted, and I think that's a very dangerous thing. And so that was my starting point of why I actually got interested in politics, because it's a family thing. You know, if you're interested in it, it's something that it's important for you as individuals and maybe as a family just to get involved with. And I hope by getting involved in politics, it's shown to hopefully a lot of people listening to the show and a lot of people just interested in politics that it's possible. Because I think often for our communities, they actually think this is not for us. And I think that's actually the last thing we need to think, because what I've always said is, coming from an Asian background and being involved in politics, you actually enrich the whole process. You bring your, whatever your background, be it Indian, Pakistani, Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, whatever your background is, you bring that depth of your cultural experience into politics, and that can only broaden the political experience and make that more relevant. And this is not just for us as a community, it is to the benefit of Parliament as a whole and to all communities, because it enriches that whole experience. So that's, the short answer to the question, why was I interested in politics, was, my family experienced through the whole East African experience how important politics is, and that's what drove me to get interested in politics.
Oh, excellent. It is very important, and I think as an Indian community we do have lots of views on politics, but we don't actually participate that much, and unfortunately it's reflected in the House of Commons. I mean, you're the only Sikh MP at the moment, and also there's only 27 MPs from ethnic minority backgrounds. I mean, what can we do to get more Indians involved in politics?
Well, I think the figures are getting better. Well, goodness, they couldn't get any worse, could they? Let's be honest about this. And I think when people see, young people particularly see that, if that individual can become a member of Parliament, whatever political affiliation they're at, if they can get involved in politics, why can't I get involved? I do find this though, and this is particularly acute, and even sometimes with my own family. I mean, I don't think my wife is particularly political, although she's interested in it, but sometimes the level of our political knowledge within our communities is poor. I'm not going to beat about the bush around that. And I see that interacting with various groups as well. You can actually realise there's quite a pronounced disengagement with politics, and not always a complete understanding, always being au fait with the full political process and how it works. That, you know, there's local politics, there's national politics. And yes, there's a big point about people from a BME background getting involved in politics, but I think there's a broader thing there about people just having more engagement with the whole political process, just to actually raise awareness of how important this stuff is. I don't mean that in a patronising, condescending way, but it's important for us as a community not just to be inward looking but outward looking as well. And I think through whatever process you can do that through, stuff like this interview, and people just seeing debates on TV and actually seeing politicians who look like them on TV, or listening to them on radio, I think actually just enriches that whole political process. I don't know why. I guess, look, I'm a second generation migrant, and you know, my kids are third generation. Often that big factor is there. You come here, and the principle is you come here, make money, be financially successful, economically successful, and that can be the number one focus. But I think there's a danger if you do that, you miss the broader picture, and that's why I've certainly been involved in politics. I mean, I came into it after I'd done about 20 years in business. I remember I spoke to one of my uncles and I said, look, I studied politics at university. I'm interested in pursuing it as a career. And he said, are you really, really interested in it? I said, yes. He says, the best advice I can give you is forget about it. Go and live a real life. And if after that you feel you want to give something back, then give it back. And I think that's some pretty good advice that was given to me at a very early age. And that's, you know, if I can pass that on, I think that would be a wise thing for anybody who's listening to, you know, bring your real life experience into the political process.
So what did you do before you entered the world of politics?
After I graduated, I did the normal Asian thing of going down an accountancy route. That wasn't really for me. So I ran my own business for a while, which was in construction. Also, probably the most important thing I did was get married. I've been married for 22 years. I've got 3 kids. And I think all of those experiences just mould you into the politician that you are and the person you are, because that's what people actually want. They want their politicians to be authentic. You know, you can't know the answer to everything as a politician, right? But what you can do is you can look within yourself at your own experiences and talk about that, because when it is personal like that and it's authentic, it has much more resonance and does connect with people. And, you know, we don't have the solutions for everything. Sometimes part of it is actually just listening to all communities and see if you can empower them to provide the solutions. So doing that, and that whole road leading up to politics, I think was quite important in developing your own, not just your political philosophy, but developing who you are as a person, because that's a big point about politics too.
So what advice would you give to young Asians who want to get involved in politics?
Be patient and be resilient. If you come into this and thinking it's just going to happen overnight, you might be lucky, right? And luck does play a big part in this game. What I found in politics, it's very different from business. If you're in business, you can pretty much plan about how you're going to progress things. And sometimes, look, if you may have a bad day, a bad month, or maybe a bad year, you can actually say, okay, maybe I've made some mistakes on this and I can rectify them. Often in politics, there's nothing as tangible as that. It is such an up and down process. So my advice, I could be patient, be resilient, and probably the most important piece of advice I can get is get your family to support you, because it can be a very lonely experience, the whole process of being a candidate. And it is quite nice just to have that little group supporting you, and that is something we as a community do so well, and it's one of the assets we have, one of the advantages we have. And so utilise that, because I think pull your strengths together. That's only going to enhance the process and actually make it more enjoyable. But you know what? That goes not just for politics. That goes if you want to run your own business. You know, you pull any resources you can.
Definitely. And have you found the community really supportive in your own family through your journey in politics?
I'd say my family have been incredibly supportive, fantastically supportive, and my extended family as well. In terms of the community as a whole, do you know, I feel, if I'm being really candid with you, we're our own worst enemies. I see lots of other community groups and I meet them, And one thing they are is they may disagree vehemently with each other, but they will stick to a united plan that they have. And I don't know why we have this within our own Asian communities. We are so incredibly divided, and sometimes what you're going to have to put up with, certainly if you come from an Asian background yourself, I don't think I'm breaking any confidences here. You're going to have to deal with all sorts of issues and people pulling you in different directions. And often their view is that their view is just the correct way, my way or the highway. And that's, whatever political affiliation you're in, politics doesn't work like that. There has to be shades of grey. You have to compromise. You have to find a sensible way forward to keep, everybody happy. If you can, believe me, you can't always do that. I know somebody once said to me that when I went for a selection meeting, they said, Mr. Uppal, you have very little experience of politics. What do you think you can bring to, sort of being a political candidate? And I said, look, living in an extended Asian family and keeping everybody happy for 20 years, if you can do that, then politics is a piece of cake. But I think certainly in dealing with the wider community as a whole, it has its own challenges. And sometimes you've got to challenge the stereotype. Within the community, often politicians just go to the, quotes, the community leaders, who are the so-called community leaders, and this can sometimes be quite damaging. I mean, it enhances their egos, and they believe they're the gatekeepers for a community and all this. And of course, the community is broader than that. It's not just one individual or a handful of individuals. It's much broader based than that. And I think all political parties have cottoned on to that. I think that has actually pretty much died a death. The only people who don't know that are the so-called community leaders.
That's such a shame. And it's such a shame to hear that as well, because as a community we should stand united and be really strong, because we have the potential to be really big and strong instead of fighting with each other.
Well, other communities do that. I think uniquely. Oh, look, they have their own differences, but look, there may be an agenda of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that you want to achieve. And, number 1 being the most important and number 10 perhaps being not so important, and you sort of grade them. And often what I've just found from my experience of just watching it as an observer, that various groups will pull different ways, and in essence you end up with nothing. You don't achieve any of the 1 to 10 goals. Whereas other groups will say, look, they may disagree with each other, but they'll walk away saying, well, at least we got 7, 8, 9 and 10. There's a strategic approach to this. And I don't know why we as communities have that frailty and that fissure almost running through the community as well. Maybe sometimes there's a view that it is politics and the whole political process attracts people who, dare I say it, rather than promoting the community issue, maybe even interested in promoting themselves. I'm not going to be naive enough to say that doesn't happen in politics, but that's fine and dandy for a while, but then there has to be some depth to it, and there has to be something which is really tangible, and maybe that's things are changing, and I believe they are. I mean, a lot of young Asian people are coming into politics, and I think they're coming in for it for the right reasons. Let me put it as simply as that. And I think that's a good thing. It's a healthy thing, and ultimately, that's good for our communities, and it's good for the political process as a whole.
So hopefully, with more young Asians taking leadership roles within the community, we can see some sort of collaboration between each other now.
Yeah, and I think, look, it makes us look more credible as a community, because we are the bridge between various generations and between the Indian subcontinent and the UK. You've got to have the right dialogue and the right way for that to happen. And we'll talk about issues that otherwise won't get spoken about. And that's why it's important for us to come forward and represent, yes, the communities generally, but also Britain as well. We can provide a bridge for both communities.
Well, definitely. And I mean, in Parliament, you do so much for the Indian community yourself. I mean, what projects are you working on at the moment, or have you worked on to help the Indian community?
Wow, where do I start? Okay.
I know there's been a lot.
There's been a lot. I've worked I don't think there's any secret. I've worked with Sikh Council a great deal on the whole issue of the Sikh hard hat issue, about turban Sikhs. In construction particularly, there's an issue around people losing their jobs because of health and safety legislation.
So what was the legislation before? They had to remove their turban?
It was basically, there was an exemption for Sikhs, but it was very restricted around the construction industry. What we're doing through the deregulation bill, and this is still going on, is just loosening that. It's defining some other things, but it's only making the situation where there's extreme hazard. People will read the legislation one way or the people, but the minister's been very clear on this. This has been Hansard working with officials again, but just making clear and ambiguous definitions on this. Worked as well about the searching of the Sikh turbans as well at European airports. That's an ongoing issue as well. Had the conversation, though these are predominantly Sikh issues. Number 10, having Vaisakhi celebrated there. At number 10, actually sending out a good message. And I remember the conversation I had with the Prime Minister. He was very receptive to it as well. First serving British Prime Minister to visit Amritsar. I have a Sikh free school within my own constituency. Again, these are all issues which are just about raising them. And just recently I raised an issue which nobody else was talking about, although some people have hinted at it, about female feticide, which was an issue which I thought was important to raise and important to bring onto the prominence. And that, again, although these, a lot of the issues I highlighted are Sikh issues, it just helps in sort of meeting with the British High Commissioner in India, understanding the Sikh diasporas and the Indian diaspora's issues that they have here, issues around entry clearance officers, immigration, just raising those and just putting those perspectives on the table. Look, a traditional white British politician may do that, but I think coming from the cultural background that I do and other non-white MPs do, it just makes that connection much more stronger and gets an insight which sometimes I think gets missed if we as BME MPs aren't there to put that case forward.
Definitely, and with the case of female feticide, it was really sad to hear that it does happen in the UK, so it's not just an issue that affects India. Do you think anything can be done about it, or is the government doing anything about it in the UK to stop it from happening?
We had a meeting yesterday, and this I think has created quite an interest, because although people had hinted about it, nobody had really spoken about this. I know the Independent newspaper had done some research on this as well, and there was figures that were I think, look, if nothing else, I can't talk about the nuts and bolts for the time being, I'm sorry, but there is a lot of conversations going on about this at the moment. But if nothing else, it raises awareness about this. Look, we know within our Asian communities, the point of going to aborting a female fetus just on the grounds of gender, I've had anecdotal conversations with this, but what nobody can deny is the reaction that is within the community of the birth of a son or as opposed to a daughter. And often, I hate to say this, but let's not beat about the bush here. Often it is your traditional mother-in-laws who are the worst, sort of propagators of this. Chal koi nahi, kudi guddi hoye this time and all that. I mean, what is all that about? It's just the pressure that's put on for young couples.
And there's always big celebrations when a son's born, as opposed
it is bizarre,
to a
isn't
girl,
it?
Yeah.
I mean, I made the mistake once when I was younger, just congratulating somebody for having a daughter, and people misinterpreting that as thinking you're just like doing it generally to sort of put somebody down. And,
no way.
Yeah, but it was years ago, and my mum and dad said, you have to be very careful about that, because I'd just come back from university and probably been a bit God-eyed, my 3 years there. And I just completely got out of my desi way of thinking.
Shock when you come back
I
home.
got out of my desi way of thinking, and I didn't mean any offence by it. I was genuinely happy for them because, as a couple, they'd waited a long time to have a child, and I was actually congratulating them because they'd got a child after so long of trying. And of course, I don't think they had any issue with it, but it was the older generation who particularly hung up about this. And now, of course, I mean, look, I'm going off record now a bit, but it does. I do find it really bizarre that as we celebrate the birth of our sons as opposed to our daughters, and yet you find as you go through, and I know through being a trustee of a kotora, when I meet a lot of the older generation now, they talk about that old saying that the daughters come and see me but the sons aren't bothered. Exactly.
It happens a lot in the Indian community,
spoiling our sons, particularly firstborn sons as well, who get incredibly spoiled. And that we have got a lot of hang-ups around this, a lot of issues. I always remember when I used to work in construction, one of my guys who used to work with me had this saying, which I would always say, a son is a son until he meets his wife. A daughter is a daughter for the rest of her life.
Oh, I like that saying. It's very true.
It is very, very true.
Yeah.
And, I've always thought, I'm not going to name any names or name anyone because they may be listening to this. But I always remember when some of these boys were born and their families celebrate them and really, dance to the rafters and that's absolutely fine. and the amount of taklif and dukkhi they get from their sons when they get to their teenage years. Jinnah khushi si at the beginning, unna taklif dinde, whereas the girls actually, just give most of it. I know I'm stereotyping, but I guess people
on the
know.
whole, it's true.
Why not have this conversation?
No,
And are we doing, as a community, are we doing ourselves any favour by, spoiling our sons? Jim-lying there, right? Okay, that's a term to use.
Yeah.
Does that do anybody any favours?
No.
I've gone a bit away from the whole issue, but I think it is linked. That a son, they'll cut the boy some slack. But for our daughters, we'll say, oh no, absolutely, and be so draconian about it. I'm not saying either way. Well, I am saying, I think if you cut because the hardest job in being a parent is not always just telling them when they do something right. It's telling your kids when they do something wrong.
No, definitely. No, it's very true. I did a show on domestic violence against women, and it did come out that, because men are pampered and they're perceived to be more superior to women, that's why, all these horrible issues happen, because, they're put on a pedestal, whereas the women are kind of always downtrodden and have to do as they're told, whereas men don't. And
speaking as a Sikh now, the teaching of our gurus is particularly about equality. Particularly around gender equality and, equality, all sorts of issues, of course, around caste and all that.
Yeah.
But we are, particularly from a Punjabi background, very macho in that, orientation. And hopefully things are changing, but they're quite slow. I don't know what to say to my kids because they look at me and they scratch their head. Why do they commiserate the birth of a daughter and celebrate the birth of a son? And my son actually said to me, he goes, I don't know why they celebrate this. Most of these guys are a waste of space. I shouldn't write about that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When he sees them at weddings, he goes, what are they doing, Dad?
I know.
And, they just come back to that, the cleave and, the hassle they give to their parents. I don't know. We've just got our priorities sometimes, I just think, out of skew. And again, I'm sorry to say these generalizations. You go to weddings and you just see the biggest issue for some. It's like, what car is this person driving? And what? And it's just the one-upmanship and the status thing which we seem so obsessed with. Whereas just if you just have peace of mind. Sometimes I do actually occasionally read the Bible, and I read one thing quite recently, and it was I can't remember exactly where it was. It was, it's better to eat crust and to have peace and quiet in your life than to feast every night and to live with strife. In essence, that we do in so many with our Asian families, we're materially well off, we drive nice cars, we may live in a nice house, but if you haven't got any shanti thode ghar de vich, what ki fayda?
No, definitely, it's very true. Money can't buy you happiness, as they say.
Can't.
Or peace of mind.
These are veering away from politics. They're more deeply philosophical things.
No,
but I think they link in. And I don't know. It's just my perspective. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I think
I think these things need to be said.
Sometimes people have just got to be honest and to say things. And you know what? Most people listening to that, even if they don't feel uncomfortable with it, they'll know in their heart of hearts whether it's true or not. They'll see it with their own eyes and their own ears.
Yeah, because gender equality and equality on the caste issue is something that Sikhism teaches.
Absolutely.
And it's something that unfortunately no one practices anymore.
I know. It's funny, and sometimes even within places of worship you see this, these aspects of people saying, talking about caste, and this is the place where the gurus actually talk about this more than anything else. But I'm filled with hope when I certainly speak to my kids, and they just haven't got any time for this at all. But hopefully things are changing, but perhaps not at the pace that I think they should change.
Well, hopefully you'll be able to, in Parliament, do some work and help this happen.
All we can do as MPs is we can talk about this. You can't change everything to legislation.
Definitely.
You've got to change mindsets. And what more powerful is the way that MPs can change things by talking about issues and at least being honest about stuff. I think that's the number one thing.
Definitely.
The rest is up to people whether they want to embrace it. But if it's at least put on a public platform and somebody speaks about it, it gives a platform which people can sort of use as a base from which they can talk about these things.
Definitely takes courage to speak up about issues as well that community members cling on to.
Well, I'm paid to do the job, so it's not that courageous. That's my job. That's what I'm here to do. So sometimes I think just part of it is just being honest with yourself and just about the issues that need to be. Because if I don't speak about it, somebody else should speak about it, but they may not.
No, definitely.
So that's why I raised the issue of the female feticide at a PMQ. And what I did like was the Prime Minister's response. You could see he was quite passionate about this. So I'm not going to say too much, but maybe there's some things in the pipeline. Let's see what happens.
Well, that's excellent. I look forward to reading about it.
Okay.
Well, you also mentioned in Parliament as well about women contributing to the economy, and at the moment there are only 22 women MPs in the House of Commons. As well as getting more ethnic minorities to become MPs, what can we do to get more women to become MPs too?
Well, I think the fact that more women are slowly, the numbers are increasing, across the board, particularly within the Conservative Party as well. Figures are changing. But I'm not going to sort of sugarcoat this or profess it's easy to become a Member of Parliament. I don't want to put anybody off, but it is a rocky road. I would say, look, especially for women, it's nice to have a supportive family if you can. And I said that at the beginning, that's part of the Asian background. I think that helps. But, your spouse has got to be supportive as well. And I think anything we can do, and you can see the numbers are increasing and the way debates are happening, you're actually seeing more and more women come through. There should be no glass ceiling. There should be no sort of perception amongst women that this is not the job for me. Anybody can do it, I know certainly for us as a party, we're open to this completely, opening the door for people and giving them as much as a platform as we can. The numbers of sort of certainly female ministers as well has increased quite dramatically by us as a government, sort of in Whip's office, junior minister, or ministerial offices, the positions and in the cabinet as well. And do you know what? Certainly we as a party, we just happen to have the only female British Prime Minister who made quite an impact as well.
Yeah.
I know some people look at Maggie and think, well, she wasn't all that female. I'm not sure about that. I'd say she was all Prime Minister and she was all woman.
Definitely.
That's what you could say. So the benchmarks and the role models are there. But it is, look, the door is open, the opportunities are there. If women want to pursue this as a career, there is nothing to hold you back. At no point has it, the door been as fully open it is. If you're from a BME background, or you're a woman, or both, the door is open. It's up to you to actually walk through it now.
And do you find it quite hard? I mean, I know lots of women do get deterred from becoming an MP just because of the sheer hours, and you're based in Westminster, if your constituency, or if you're from the other parts of England, as you yourself are. I mean, do you find it quite hard travelling in between Wolverhampton and Westminster and having a family life as well as working?
The number one thing I dislike about the job more than anything else, I don't mind anything else, anybody can criticise me, that's fine, that's I'm okay, I sleep well at night doing what I'm doing, I don't mind that. The one bit of the job that does bother me is I don't see my kids and my family as much as I should do, especially my older children. My two teenage children, I spent a lot of time bringing them up because I used to work from home, and my wife's a lawyer. With the little one, she's going to be 7. I probably haven't spent as much time with her as I did with the older 2 kids, and that's tough. But this is where the family thing comes in. My parents are incredibly supportive and they help me a great deal. Maybe not everybody's got that platform. It's not, and that is one thing I think is very difficult. I don't like that about the job at all. But my older kids particularly say, Dad, you're doing the job you're doing, and it's good that you're doing it. You're the only seat member of Parliament, and you've got to do it. If nothing else, maybe you'll inspire somebody else to sort of come through. And I said, that's fine. So, though it is difficult, and you've got to do something that suits you. And that suited us as a family. We all work around that, and even the older kids are really happy with it as well. But I do feel a bit guilty. I don't get to spend as much time with my youngest as I did with the older 2. But whenever I'm there, I do make some time. Even meetings. As an MP, you can have meetings 24/7 if you want to. You've got to have a cut-off point, and I'm always there if I can to read the little one a story in the evening, or make sure I drop her on school on Monday and on Friday mornings.
That's really nice.
Yeah, no, it does. It's good for you as a person because it's good to do something which is non-political.
No, definitely. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, my dad was there a lot, and it really, it does mean a lot to you when you're older. You think back.
It does, because that's in many ways, my most important job is actually being a father and being an MP. I'm very lucky, very privileged to do this, but you need to put things in perspective sometimes. And just being an MP, it's okay. It's very nice, and I, get to go to Amritsar with the Prime Minister, and that's something I'll never forget. But there's other jobs as well.
Well, definitely.
Yeah.
On that note, I'd like to thank Paul Uppal for joining me in the studio. Hope everyone has a great Easter weekend and join me next Sunday, same time, same place, where I'll be talking to the Conservative Friends of India director, Mayuri Parmar, on why Indian youth find it hard to engage in politics.